guardians of the galaxy.
What's up, people of YouTube? You are joining us over here on Twitch. I just finished Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy on my PC, and I want to give my thoughts for the game. First of all, same thing I did in my last review. You got to talk about what your expectations were when you go into a game. What you expect from a game makes a huge difference for how much you enjoy the game. I knew from the trailers that the game would have a lot of dialogue. They're the Guardians of the Galaxy. They cannot stop talking. People complained about that when they saw the trailers. They were like, how can you play a game when the characters never shut up? That is something that I was expecting a little bit. But they showed gameplay, basic action RPG. I played Final Fantasy VII Remake. That's an action RPG. It's pretty good. It's pretty fun. So I saw Guardians of the Galaxy. Obviously, Square wasn't developing it. They're publishing it. But I figured, it might have some similarities to that. And, the action RPG gameplay might be fun. So I think I'll start off with the good stuff first. I think that the game's combat is fun. It's not quite as heavy on the action part as it is on the management RPG part. What I mean by that is you are Star-Lord. Star-Lord has his cooldown ability and he can shoot his guns. You can do melee attacks too, but it's not really in your best interest to be close to your enemies when you can shoot them from afar. While you hold the shoot button from afar, you can tell your teammates to use their cooldowns. So it's more so that sort of system where you're managing all of your cooldowns, deciding when to use them, assessing the situation. Should you use ice? Should you use something else? That sort of system. Not mechanically intensive. I think that they do well with that. I think that the issues that it runs into are unrelated to whether or not they made that battle system well. For example, and I'm going to talk more about this later, dialogue. There is so much dialogue in this game, and when you are battling, they will not stop talking. It's like a JRPG, but like times 10.
I'm really feeling it!
They have quips, endless quips for everything, right? But that has no bearing on whether or not actually playing the game, actually physically handling the character, actually deciding which cooldowns to use. Those things aren't affected by dialogue, right? So I think that the execution on the combat is fun. It really shined towards the end of the game where they focus on putting you into a lot more battles than they usually do. And I think that was the best part of the game, where they actually let you do a lot more fighting. I enjoyed that part way more than the rest of it. So combat, good. The other thing I would like to talk about in the good section is the writing. Now, that's pretty vague, so I need to get specific about what I actually liked about the writing, because there is some stuff that I disliked regarding the writing. I think that when you play other games, I think maybe especially JRPGs, you can see that the writers are struggling with the very basic concept of show don't tell.
Not good!
That's like one of the things that you learn in school about what good writing is like. It's a very simple concept. If you want to convey something to your audience, don't make the characters say what you want to convey. Show the audience what you mean, and they will understand what you want to convey instead of having, exposition. We all know that JRPGs struggle with that.
Not good!
In this game, I feel like there was maybe once or twice where I thought to myself, they're explaining here instead of showing, and maybe they could have done more showing, but, maybe they didn't have the time to. But those are more exceptions to the rule. Here, they understood how to convey without only exposition. So some very easy examples from the very beginning of the game. You start as Star-Lord, he gets out of bed, you're clearly going on an important mission, and he spends a whole bunch of time looking at himself in the mirror and like making himself look good. And just from that, immediately, I, learned a lot about the character. This is a vain guy who, for some reason, even though there's an important mission that they need to do, even though he's the leader of the team, he's gonna spend a lot of time in front of that mirror. And I didn't like how much time he spent in front of that mirror, but they were making very clear that he's gonna spend way too much time in front of the mirror. So that tells you a lot about the character, right? The second example I would give that's from the beginning of the game is they never said that Rocket and Groot have a very strong or a very close relationship. They conveyed that through Rocket becoming very upset when a suggestion came up that would put Groot in danger, right? So it's just stuff like that that you would hope that more games do and struggle with a little bit, but I think that in this game, they've really nailed getting ideas across without having to put in too much exposition. One of the main positives that I definitely have to mention is the choices that they have you take part in throughout the story. Maybe in those trailers when they were showing all that dialogue, they were trying to let you know that dialogue was going to be very important, and if you're going into this game, you need to know that dialogue is very important, and a lot of the times it feels more important than even the actual combat. You're going to be spending a lot of time listening to dialogue and making decisions based off of that dialogue, and that dialogue and the choices that you make do actually have consequences for the story. You see different cutscenes, you might not have certain battles. Someone had mentioned earlier that it's similar to Breath of the Wild, where if you do certain parts of the game, other parts of the game are harder or easier. That's true for this game, and they've made it so that your decisions actually feel like they make a difference in the story. So I think that is really good. It's done really well. Something that people complain about in other games that are supposed to be, dialogue focused. They'll say that the choices don't really feel significant. But I do think that in this game, the choices feel significant. So if you're going into the game and you want something that's story driven, and you want to, have an effect on the story based on the dialogue you choose or the choices you choose, you're gonna have a good time with the game, I think. And just a little thing to add on to the story, I think that in some parts of the game, they blend the characters, their powers, the gameplay, and the story very, very well to a point where it's something that you would not be able to achieve unless you were playing a video game. I won't talk too much about that because it does spoil things a little bit, but kudos to them for being able to pull that off. Now that we've gone through the main positives, I want to talk about some of the negatives, and this is something that I feel like had a significant effect on my experience with the game and how much I enjoyed it. There is just way too much writing in this game. It's not an exaggeration when I say that I think they could have cut roughly 10 to 20% of the dialogue and it would have been better. And I'm not just saying that because I am more focused on gameplay when I play games. I think that the amount of dialogue is actually detrimental to the experience. For example, it's really cool when, the Guardians of the Galaxy are walking around and they're going back and forth and there's a lot of banter, they're making jokes, whatever it is. But, yes, exactly as Genesis has pointed out here in the chat, when dialogue gets cut off by new dialogue, that's very bad.
They would have taken our beast.
See? This is working out.
Let's just get this done.
There's no reason for me as the player to have to choose between playing the game and listening to the dialogue. If I'm walking along and I want to go into a new area, I have to think to myself, wait, are they done talking yet? Because sometimes when you walk into that new area, they cut off the conversation completely and you don't get to hear what they were going to say. And I want to hear what they were going to say, but I also want to keep playing the game. So I shouldn't have to choose between those two things. And I think if they just cut out some of the dialogue, you solve that problem. And it's the same thing with what is probably, I think, one of the worst battle mechanics I've ever encountered. Maybe some people like it, but for me, the huddle mechanic, I hate it. Like, I don't think it's good in practice. I don't think it's good in theory. I don't think when that idea was mentioned as the game was being developed that anyone should have said, yes, that's a good idea. Because what happens is, while you're playing, if you want to buff all of your teammates, you know, basically like a special move that buffs all of your teammates, you have to listen to dialogue for 45 seconds. It completely stops the combat, and you listen to dialogue for 45 seconds. This is not an exaggeration. And in fact, I think it's imperative that I add an example of this 45 seconds into the video so that you can understand. We're gonna huddle
Guys, huddle up!
to get the power-ups.
What a bunch of losers! Me and Groot, we win this in our sleep.
Thanos used to time me in fights like this just to make it interesting.
They are no match for these blades, Peter Quill.
All right, listen. This isn't our first rodeo, guys. Problem is, if we play it cocky, one little mistake is gonna bring us down. So let's get back out there, give this fight complete dedication, and make them scream. Who's with me?
Today, I am the destroyer.
So you can see, if you're really, you know, engaged with the combat, but you also need to get those power-ups, and you want to make sure your cooldowns are much shorter, you have to go through those 45 seconds. And it's not like the dialogue is new every time, which in that case, it is slightly better, but it doesn't really fix the problem. I saw the same dialogue multiple times, and this is also not an exaggeration. After the third time I used that ability, I only used it when I was in big trouble and really needed the buffs, or completely by mistake. Like, I did not want to use it, but I happened to press the 2 buttons that activates it. So I hope that no one ever implements a dialogue-based combat ability that is that long ever again. Like, this is unacceptable. Repeat dialogue was an issue the entire game. During combat, they would say the same thing constantly. Yeah, so that, I think, ties into what I was saying about cutting 10 to 20% of the dialogue, right? If they weren't so committed to having the characters talk all of the time, then you wouldn't have to have them repeat dialogue, because then you wouldn't have to use the dialogue as often. And that's what I was saying. I think it actually would make the game better if they cut out, not necessarily the actual writing, like, you can keep those lines, but just don't put them everywhere. In a movie, I understand what they were going for here, right? It's the Guardians of the Galaxy. They talk all the time. Whatever, I get it. In a movie, they might talk all the time, but that's maybe 2 hours, 3 hours at max. This is a video game. I don't need the characters to be talking the entire time. It would be nice to have, you know, some downtime where I can actually think. And there were a lot of times where I was playing, I was like, I would like to think, but they keep on talking, so I don't have time to think. And I kind of think that they wanted that to be the experience, so like they achieved what they were going for. The reason I say I think it might have been on purpose, well, I can't say completely because it's a spoiler, but they do seem to want to reinforce that these characters always talk, even to the point of completely annoying you. And there were times where I thought to myself, or even said aloud, man, this is super annoying. I wish they would stop doing that. And then a character in the game said that they were also annoyed by how much people were talking. So I think they understood what they were doing. I just don't like it. And maybe some people are okay with it, but I just don't like it. Something else that I do think would have been solved by cutting about 10 or 20% of the dialogue is sometimes it did feel like the writing was a bit of a mixed bag. There were some really good lines. There were some good jokes. But then there were also some where I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be laughing with them or if I was supposed to be, you know, thinking of it as awkward or whatever.
Have you embraced her divine promise?
Only if I get her consent first.
For the promise to
God.
be made real.
I don't know. I felt like when I was playing that some of the lines didn't need to be there because it didn't feel like good writing compared to the actual lines that were good. So they could have just cut out, you know, the weaker lines and left in the better stuff, and then it would have made for an overall better experience. When you have the weaker stuff next to the better stuff, it doesn't add to make an even better experience. It takes away from the overall experience. So I think they could have polished a little bit in that area as well. So having too much dialogue is the major issue. I think if you go in with the mindset of, you know, having dialogue-based gameplay and engaging with all of that dialogue and sacrificing actually moving through the game so that you can hear all the dialogue, if you go in wanting that, then it's probably fine. Maybe. It really depends on the person. But something that I think everyone will be able to agree on is that this game needs a lot more polish, and there are a few points where this was very obvious to me. I'll give a few examples. Some of the sounds were just completely off. There was one scene where tensions were sort of building up and Rocket was getting angry, and then you see he's about to shoot his gun. So he's trying to show, like, these are the big guns, basically. And then he starts shooting, and the sound of the gun is pitiful.
I'll show you, worthless.
Oh. It has no impact at all. There were a few scenes where we saw that Drax wasn't actually holding his knives. It was like floating in his hands. And then when he posed a certain way, he would like put the knives through his body and it would clip and whatever. You'll see like Gamora's hair is always stuck in that same position. There was one point where, you know, if you're saying, you know, but those things don't really matter. There was a point where it really did matter because I was running to an elevator and I got next to a rail and I got completely stuck in that rail. The game understood that I was stuck, and after a few seconds it pulled me out of the rail, but when it did that, over the course of loading, I think Drax just completely disappeared and I couldn't progress. And I died because of it, because enemies kept coming and we couldn't run away because Drax wasn't there. Drax? Where's Drax? Get out of here!
These deluded souls do not know when to quit.
Where's Drax? Maybe he's stuck. Yeah, did he also get stuck? I don't know. We're gonna die.
Peter Quill, unleash me onto these fools.
What are you talking about, bro? We're trying to leave. No! Drax, you killed us. That wasn't even the only time that the game soft-locked itself. I think it got soft-locked 2 or 3 times where I had to just go back to the last checkpoint. Yeah, there's just so many things where it's clear there wasn't enough time to polish the game. And I really wish they would have had the time because it would have made the experience, you know, more impactful. You clipped through that rock. Oh yeah, there was a point where I went into a small corridor that I'm pretty sure I was supposed to go through, but then the game just freaked out and then I clipped through a rock and then I couldn't move. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that that you hope wouldn't be in the game. Luckily they did put in load last checkpoint, and the checkpoints are very generous, but that stuff really brings you down when you're playing. It cuts off all the momentum. So to wrap things up, I would like to talk about who I recommend the game for and who I do not recommend the game for. I recommend this game for people who want to have a story-driven gaming experience. That's very obvious, I guess, if you look into the game. I didn't do as much research because I don't like to be spoiled about really anything when I go into a video game, but if you go into this game expecting a lot of dialogue, a lot of cutscenes, a pretty good story, it felt very emotional, it had a lot of impact in certain areas. You might not like Star-Lord or you might not like a character, but I don't think that's because it's bad writing. I think the characters are written the way the writers intended them to be written. It's just that some people like some characters and hate some other characters. A little bit of an issue in a video game where you actually have to play as a character, but if you understand that point and you're going in for something where you can see a good story and you can make dialogue choices that actually have consequences, this is probably a very good game for you. The gameplay is going to be enough, at least serviceable. I liked it. I thought it was good, but it's going to be at least serviceable for people who just want to go in for the story. Who I do not recommend this game for, people who are going in for combat, for gameplay that is not dialogue based. They have made it very clear through the playthrough that dialogue is a very specific part of this game that you need to engage with. It is part of the gameplay. If you don't like dialogue being gameplay and you want to do a lot more fighting, a lot more action, you know, the action part of the action RPG, you're probably going to have a bad time. I really wouldn't recommend it for you. All of that being said, I do think if this game was polished in the ways that I've already described, the game can be more for both parties. It can be a better experience for people who want to have fun combat, fun gameplay, and it can be a better experience for people who are going in for just the story. Just polish up the game, give it a little bit more time. Obviously, I'm talking about for maybe, you know, they have a next game that they have in mind. Whenever they're working on that, please give it the time. Please polish it. Please go through the script one more time, cut out the stuff you don't need, and you've got yourself a pretty good game. That's going to be the review for Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. If you like this video, or if you would like to be updated whenever I upload reviews or Let's Plays, I am going to upload the Let's Play of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy to YouTube. Make sure to subscribe so you'll get those updates. If you would like to join for other Let's Plays, you can find my Twitch name here, and you can find the link to my Twitch in the description. Lastly, if you would like to stay updated, you can follow me on Twitter. That link is also in the description, and you can also find that here. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.